Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast 243. I trust you're doing well. I want to thank so many of you for reaching out and talking with you this past week. Some of you face to face. I really enjoyed that. So thanks so much. And of course, thanks for helping promote Moose Podcast and what message I have here. I'm very grateful for that. Also want to thank my good friends at Bedford Camera, bedfords.com. If you head to their website, that's bedfords.com, you'll find a whole lot of really great sales going on at Nikon gear right now. Hundreds of dollars off on some of my favorite lenses. Now, on top of that, when you check out, whether you're there in person or on the phone or through the website, use that MOOSE discount, that's Moose, you're going to get more money back besides the sales price. So it's a great time to be buying. Great savings. Probably no sales tax, no shipping. Check it out, bedfords.com, the best there is when it comes to camera gear. Let's get right to this week's podcast, The Great White Mystery. Well, it starts way back when. I was a student at Brooks. I had a little studio apartment. You walk in the front door and you pretty much smack the back wall. Had a really small window back there. That's where my bed, my desk, dark room, everything was crammed in one little spot. But that one little window, well, it was underneath a tree. And me being me, I managed to figure out how to attach a bracket to the outside of the building, and I had one bird feeder right there. So I could shoot out this little window. Now, I had my back against the other wall of the studio because of the minimum focus distance of my treasured Nikkor 405-6. And I would photograph the birds coming to the feeder right there. I remember my downstairs neighbor, I was on the second floor, she would often complain how she had to clean her little window of whitewash because all the birds come into the feeder up at mine. But it was staring out that little window and shooting out that little feeder. God, I just remember those days. One of the first birds that came, because this was in Santa Barbara, it was in the oak trees, was a white-breasted nuthatch. Great bird. I love nuthatches. They're the ones that go down the tree instead of going up it. They're always looking at the top of the bark crevices instead of the bottom like everybody else. And they're always, even when I was at my desk or just laying in the bed reading a book, I could always hear them calling. So I've always had an affinity for those little guys. Now, 405-6, boy, I remember I worked really hard and saved up a long time to buy that lens used. That was for so many years, my bird lens. So many lessons for all that. Anyway, bring you up to current times. I'm here at the ranch. And we have quite a few white-breasted nuthatches. I distinctly remember the first time that they were seen. Jake's the first one I actually saw him on the ranch last year. I've written about the red-breasted nuthatch that nested in our box last year. I got the photograph. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen this year. And yeah, we have red-breasted nesting again this year, but not in that same box. But we also have a pair of white-breasted nuthatches nesting in a box. And I was really delighted to see that happen. Now, this is months ago, literally months ago, and they started to use that box. And their nesting period, number of days that they are in a box with eggs, they have nestlings for the hatch. The total time is less, it's just basically 3 weeks. But like I said, they've been up there for months. So I go on a trip and I was, saying, oh God, I'm going to miss the whole activity. And Sharon would keep texting me saying, oh, they're still there. I can still see them. And I'd come home. Sometimes I had just a couple of days turnover, but I would go and photograph them. I was always looking for that photograph of the youngsters sticking their head out being fed by mom and dad. So I photographed them the first time literally 5 weeks ago. And I was just photographing them literally this morning. Now, the math doesn't add up, and it's been driving me nuts. I mean, they're in one of my boxes, and they nest in boxes more often than like the red-breasted. And I have my lit mechanics mirror that I can stick in there, and I did it a week ago just to see what I was, how much time I had left. Because being in a cavity, you can't see the kids, so you don't know what stage they are of the nesting. And I stuck it in there. I could see it was a pile of feathers. I mean, there's got to be a minimum of 6, if not more, young in there. But they've got feathers. And I'm like, how can they still be there at this point? Now, I'm photographing them. I have a single SB5000, and it's at an angle. So I've set up the lens. I'm shooting the 180 to 400 at 400 millimeters, and they don't really care. When I'm not there, they land on the lens and the camera. They land on the tripod, the light stand, so they really don't care I'm there. They've not landed on me yet, but they sure do come over and look at me. There's a branch. But anyway, I got one SB5000, and it's probably no more than 3 feet from the box. Got a single quick box light diffuser on it, and it's at an angle, so the light's just skimming past the front of it. You want to see the lighting technique, make sure you go to my YouTube channel. I did a video on how I photographed the red-breasted nuthatch last year, and that gives you all the information about the setup. I got the 180-400, like I mentioned. I'm watching it. I'm shooting the Z6 II. And I mean, all sorts of amazing things happen here. It's been going on for 5 weeks, way too long. I have 3 birds attending the nest. I have 2 that they just look beaten up. Their feathers they're not crisp and clean. They're real dirty and spotty, and they're haggard feathers. The ends are broken off. And then I've got one individual that's bright clean. And a lot of birds have a helper when they're nesting season. That's not uncommon for many, many species. I got these 3 birds going in and out. Even one time, this past week, I'm looking through the lens, and I shoot with my left eye, and I have my right eye open. I see this dark thing coming in, and I said, "Oh, the robin's coming in," because just in the same tree, at the end of a branch, just 10 feet away, there's an active robin nest. And I figure, the robin's coming in, and all of a sudden, I see this thing in the viewfinder, and I look, and here's a western bluebird, a male, hovering at the entrance, and there's an adult inside, and all these kids, and all I can keep thinking is, why are these guys still all here? Because it's been so long. Now, the fact that I am able to do this, one, I'm very fortunate. And I am very grateful for the fact that I have that ability. But it all goes back to that time when I had that little window in the back of my studio apartment. And I'd have to kind of stood up on a little box so I could see out this window. Yeah, it's almost like a prison cell when you think about it, now that I think about it. Anyway, I shoot out this window, shooting out, and I see the little white-breasted guys going up and down that tree bark and photographing that 400. If I hadn't done that all back then, I wouldn't be doing this now. And I'm photographing with really just, sheer delight. I'm there in the morning, just 90 minutes of just being out there with them and watching all this activity. And I'm going, wow, this is really cool. But why in the hell are you guys still here? I mean, it's been this long. And I'm still, and here's the frustrating part, I'm still not seeing those little guys stick their heads out of the window, out of that hole in the box to get fed. And this morning was kind of like my last chance. I'm about to take off again for a week. And I'm like, Well, what the hey? Well, anyway, so there I am. I'm looking at it, and this really clean, white, beautiful one comes in and goes back out. And then it dawned on me. The helper. The helper is a kid. It's one of their kids, and it must be from the first clutch. They must still have kids in the nest because for some reason they thought they needed to do a double clutch. And then when you add a second nesting to the first and the time, the math works out. So this pair, now they're not banded or anything, so I can't tell you for a fact, but it'd be highly unlikely that another pair of white-breasted nuthatches took up this box and decided to nest right after this pair to raise their family. That doesn't work that way. Now, double clutching, what is double clutching? It's a strategy that some species do naturally. They do it automatically, and that's how they get more of their young out into the world. Some species double clutch when their first clutch fails. The eggs get taken by a snake or a raccoon, or the young get taken out of the nest by a predator like a raptor or something. So they naturally have a second clutch or a second set of eggs. So they do raise some young that year. A lot of times, though, when they do a double clutch, they go to another nest site because they partially blame that nest site in their mind for why they weren't successful. But in this case, since Sharon I've never saw anybody else but white-breasted every day in that box, all I can figure is that the great white mystery was they double clutched. Now, why is that any of this significant? Why am I even doing a podcast on that? Well, for a lot of reasons, a number of conversations I've had this week. First, you don't have to have something like the ranch like we have to enjoy photographing birds in your own backyard. If I hadn't done that way back when in that little studio, I know I wouldn't be doing it now, but that's when the whole thing started and ignited my imagination and the challenge, the gauntlet was thrown down. At the same time, I got really intrigued, especially in the white-breasted nuthatch. And then I saved and worked hard to have that first lens. And there was a lot of possibilities, but if you want the best results, you need to have the best gear that you could get. And that's that simple. I know there's that old moniker out there, what's the best camera? The one you have with you. That's a nice, comfort food kind of saying, but be realistic. That's not how it works. All right. To say, when somebody asks you what's the best lens for this, that, and the other, and to tell them, well, it's the one you can afford. Let's be honest. That's not a true answer. And more importantly, it doesn't help the person because A, it doesn't give them a direct answer, and B, mentally, they might be saying, well, I can't afford anything. So then what? You don't do photography? So yeah, that 405.6, that little window, that's why I'm out here shooting now. And then I didn't have to go somewhere from so great wildlife adventure for some great wildlife mystery. I just went out my front door, literally. I walked across the lawn and across the drive, and there's the nest box. I can sit there in my reading chair and watch it with binoculars. And then the challenge of not only of figuring out what was going on, but the light, the lens, be there the right time, be home to see it all. It's in wildlife photography, just the littlest things that can bring the biggest rewards. And it starts with how you think about those things as a photographer. The challenge, first of all, earn the money to have the lenses, then to have the time. and they have the space to do all that, then they actually apply all those things that you first challenge you came up and met. And then the second challenge, that time, the third challenge, to go out there and get the photograph. And then to me, one of the great things is you have the time to actually ask yourself stupid questions like, why 5 weeks later do you guys still have kids in the box? And the final, for me, reward was I had this, rather than a haggard, all beat up looking adult feeding these kids, I've got this spanking brand new one because they double clutched, and one of the kids is a helper. Makes that photograph really sing, is that beautiful clean white that makes the white-breasted nuthatch. So the Great White Mystery, to me, in my mind, as I talk about all this, is multifaceted. I guess the part of the mystery is underrating your own backyard, your own talents, your own ability, and then the biological mystery that was put in front of me that now I solve. I've got the photograph. I'm quite happy. Well, I hope you folks have an incredibly great week. I appreciate you stopping by, and remember to make every click your story.